صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وصلى الله على محمد وآله عليهم السلام. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أوصيني وإياكم بتقوى الله. I call first and foremost myself and all of the believers, the mu'mineen and mu'minat present, to God fearfulness, God consciousness and piety. In these days we are commemorating the death anniversary, the martyrdom of our 10th Imam, Imam al-Jawad, Muhammad ibn Ali alayhi salam. Ninth Imam, excuse me. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And in light of that commemoration, I would like to share a hadith of our ninth Imam, where the Imam is reported to have said, "Al-mu'minu yahtaju ila thalathi khisalin, tawfiqin min Allahi azza wa jal, wa wa'idhin min nafsihi, wa qabulin mimman yansahu." There are a series of ahadith, a category of ahadith, wherein the Imams, the Ahlul Bayt, will call the mu'mineen and the mu'minat towards having particular attributes. They say that, for example, these are certain attributes that every believer has or should have. Every believer should aspire to. And there are even books that are written compiling these ahadith that talk about these attributes. And these are attributes, again, where the Imams will call their followers to acquire within themselves, to develop within themselves. And there are various ahadith. I'm sure many of you may have heard some of these ahadith. One such hadith is the hadith of Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, where the Imam says, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where the Imam says, every believer requires within himself three characteristics, three attributes. Tawfiqin min Allah, a grace and a blessing and an opportunity from Allah. Wa wa'idhin min nafsihi, and an exhortation and a source of admonishment from within himself. Wa qabulin mimman yansahu, and the accepting of the good counsel and the good advice of those who will advise him. In this hadith of the Imam, where he is describing, again, those attributes of a faithful believer, the Imam begins with something that maybe we wouldn't expect. It is not an attribute of myself where I have the blessing of Allah. Rather, it is something that Allah gives me. The tawfiq that Allah gives me is a blessing that Allah presents in my life and bestows in my life. And so we wouldn't normally consider it an attribute of a person's personality or character. But what possibly the Imam is trying to tell us is that this very core blessing, this very core tawfiq that we might all take for granted, requires a certain level of recognition and a certain level of understanding from where that tawfiq, all of those blessings that we have in our lives, where that comes from. And to better understand what tawfiq is, we can look at the Quran. In one of the places where the Quran explicitly mentions tawfiq is in Surah Hud. Allah describes for us the story of Prophet Shu'aib. This is ayah number 84 of Surah Hud until ayah number 88 and 89. Allah describes for us an interaction between Prophet Shu'aib and his people. When Prophet Shu'aib brings his message to his people, he says to them, first and foremost, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ. O my people, do not worship any other than Allah. Worship Allah, and you do not have a deity or a God other than Him. And then the Prophet exhorts them and advises them and counsels them towards being fair in their transactions with other people. He talks about financial transactions, mikyal wa mizan. However you might, for example, you might be selling something to another person, you should be fair and just in those transactions. And of course, the Quran doesn't limit itself to necessarily financial transactions, but even a lot of our interpersonal relationships, even a lot of our interactions with other believers and as well with other non-believers, we have to be fair and we have to be just. And the Prophet Shu'aib says, إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. I see that you have all of these blessings that God has given you, and I fear for you. إِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. I fear for you that punishment that will come. And the Prophet continues his exhortation and his message. What's interesting, one of the interesting parts of this interaction between the Prophet and his people is how those people respond. They say to the Prophet, قَالُوا يَا شُعَيْبُ أَصَلَاتُكَ تَأْمُرُكَ أَن نَتْرُكَ مَا يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُنَا. The people of Prophet Shu'aib tell him and ask him in sort of a rhetorical way, they say to him, is it your salat? Is it your worship? And these acts of piety that you do, that has caused you and has forced you to come and tell us these things that you tell us, that we should not follow the practice of our forefathers, that we should, for example, not do the things that we want to do with our material wealth, with the things that we have in terms of our finances, in terms of our material wealth. Is it your practice? What's interesting here is that the people of Shu'aib don't say, is it your Lord? Don't say, is it something greater, or even is it something, for example, like the people of other prophets may have accused the prophets. Is it some other deity or some other force that is telling you to do this? They say, is it your actions? They are not even willing to recognize that there is something greater that is calling the prophet to this exhortation, that is giving the message of this prophet. And so Prophet Shu'aib, in response, he says, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِن كُنْتُ عَلَى بَيِّنَةٍ مِّن رَبِّي وَرَزَقَنِي مِنْهُ رِزْقًا حَسَنًا وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُخَالِفَكُمْ إِلَى مَا أَنْهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ إِنْ أُرِيدُ إِلَّا الْإِصْلَاحَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُ وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. In this ayah number 88 of Surah Hud, Prophet Shu'aib gives his response. He says, O my people, do you think that if this were actually a clear proof from my Lord? Again, he is recognizing where that message is coming from, that blessing is coming from, that blessing of hidayah. He is first doing this, giving the right of Allah, giving him his due right and what he deserves. He says, and he points his people towards Allah, saying, if this were a clear proof from my Lord, if what I am giving you, this exhortation, is a clear proof from my Lord, what would you expect me to do? Do you expect me to follow what you say? Do you expect me to relinquish and forget all of those things if there is a clear proof for my Lord, that I should forget all of those things so that I can just follow what you say. And I don't want, the Prophet says, don't think for a second that I want to come before you and get to those things that I am forbidding from you and I am prohibiting you to do. Don't think that I am prohibiting you from doing certain things and then I'm going to go behind your back and get those things first. For example, if there is, say, some sort of lottery ticket, and a person comes and says, no, nobody can, take part in lottery, and then he goes and he's the first one in line for the lottery ticket, right? That would be not only hypocrisy, but that would be that would be taking advantage maybe of the gullibility or of the ability of other people to believe that person. And so Nabi Shu'aib says, don't think that this is my intention. I only want, in uridu illa al-islaha mastata'tu. I only want to give and to guide and to correct all of those things that I see and that I can. All of those things that I see, all of that evil and that error that I see you embarking upon, I am trying to correct that. In this ayah, Nabi Shu'aib ends with the following line, وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. I do not have any blessing or any opportunity or any grace except with Allah or except through Allah. عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. It is in Him that I trust. It is in His hands that I have my welfare and all of that which I have in my life. وَإِلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. And I turn towards Him. In this ayah of the Quran, Allah is telling us that the first and most important tawfiq that we have, the most important thing, that most important blessing that Allah has given us, is that guidance back to Him. And that recognition that all blessings that we have, all blessings that have been placed in our lives are originally from Allah. Alayhi tawakkalt. The Prophet says here, I turn and I give my entire welfare to Allah. The Prophet is saying that the source of my being and the source of my goodness is Allah. And then when I am thinking about where I am heading, the ultimate goal that I have, where I will end, that is also Allah. So the Prophet is determining a person's entire life, from the beginning until the end. And within these two poles comes the path that we take. If we look back at that hadith of Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, sallu ala Muhammad. The Imam says every believer, every faithful believer needs three khisal, needs three attributes. Tawfiqin min Allah. First and foremost, we must recognize and have that blessing of Allah. Have that blessing of Allah and then recognize that we have this blessing and where this blessing comes from. That guidance that Allah gives us is that greatest level of tawfiq. And so if we want to begin our path, again, there are a certain category of ahadith where the Imams talk about the attributes that a mu'min must have and the attributes that a mu'min must cultivate within himself. If we want to begin this path of cultivating those attributes, we have to first and foremost recognize who has placed us on this path. And once we do that, then we can know where we have to turn to increase those blessings and increase that process and those attributes that God wants to have within us, wants to find within us. Right? So the very first step in every single action that we do, in every single process and path that we take, is first and foremost doing dua and turning towards Allah so that Allah may increase those blessings within our lives. In fact, when we look in the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt, the Ahlul Bayt describe for us this line that we recite on a daily basis, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where the Imam says, La hawla lana an ma'siyatillah illa bi'awnillah. There is no power, there is no ability, there's no might that we have to stay away from the sins and the error from Allah except through His grace and His help. وَلَا قُوَّةَ لَنَا عَلَىٰ طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بِتَوْفِيقِ اللَّهِ. And we don't have any power or any ability to do the worship and obey Allah except with that grace that Allah has placed within our lives. And so if we want to begin down this path of creating better human beings, of improving ourselves and improving our lives, we first have to look towards Allah. The second, very quickly, the second attributes that Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam mentions is وَوَاعِدٍ مِّن نَفْسِهِ, that a person should recognize, once we have recognized that we are in total dependence on Allah and we need Him for everything that we have, then the flip side of that is that we recognize that we have nothing and that we are in total need of Allah and we are totally ignorant and devoid of all of those values and virtues that Allah wants us to have. And so we must work towards that. We must look within ourselves, have that sense of self-reflection, and exhort ourselves first and foremost. وَوَاعِدٍ مِّن نَفْسِهِ. Exhort ourselves, admonish ourselves. Our first responsibility is to look at our own actions before we look at anybody else's. وَقَبُولٍ مَنْ يَنْصَحُ مِمَّنْ يَنْصَحُ. And to accept the advice and the counsel, the good counsel and the advice that someone who advises us may give us. And to end this khutbah, I will end with a hadith from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, where the Imam says, is reported to have said, Al-istisharatu aynul hidayah wa qad khatara man istaghna bi ra'yih. The Imam says, asking for good counsel, asking for good advice, looking and seeking good advice is the very essence and guidance itself. And whoever does not look towards others, and whoever sees himself as being independent and without any need because of his own opinion or in his own opinion, this person has placed himself in grave danger. So if we are looking for that guidance, that tawfiq of Allah, one of the sources of that tawfiq, that blessing that Allah has placed in our lives, is looking within our community, looking within those other people within our community and without, for good counsel, for advice. And not thinking that we know everything or not thinking that we have everything. Right? When we know that we are in total need of Allah, then we must seek Allah's guidance. And one of the sources of guidance that Allah has placed within our lives is that istishara, that good counsel that Allah has placed, that knowledge that Allah has given to others, that know-how that Allah has bestowed upon others, and through those other people we can benefit and we can be guided. And so when we are looking to put our own lives in order, whether it is on a personal level, on a professional level, financially, academically, or what other part of our lives that we have, then we must look towards others for that good counsel and that advice. This is the sunnah of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صلوا على محمد وعلى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Usini wa iyyakum bi taqwallah. I seek forgiveness for myself and for all of the believers present. In this second khutbah, I would like to look towards the next few days that are coming in the Islamic calendar, which is the days of Hajj, and to just very briefly share with all of you a hadith of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, where the Imam says, "Man mata fi tariq Makkah dhahiban aw ja'iyan amina min al-faza' al-akbari yawm al-qiyamati." The Imam says, whoever passes, whoever dies on the way, in the path, whether it is going towards Mecca or coming back from Mecca, this person is going to be safe and safeguarded from that great fear, that great trial and tribulation on the Day of Judgment. And this is in fact another one of those blessings, those tawfiqat that Allah has placed within our lives, where the Ahlul Bayt describe for us a world which is much deeper than what it seems. The material world sometimes can seem very real to us. But the way that the Ahlul Bayt describe for us the world, they tell us that there is a higher realm. There is a more important realm within this world, within this creation of Allah, that we must have our sights towards. And even when we face trials and difficulties in this realm, in the material world, whether it is our material wealth or our physical bodies, then we must rest assured in that higher realm. If we are obeying the commandments of Allah, if we are fulfilling those obligations that Allah has placed upon us, then we can be rest assured that God is going to compensate us for those difficulties that we face. The Imam says, whoever begins on this path of going towards Mecca, whoever begins on this journey, whether it is going to Mecca or coming back, and he faces some sort of difficulty, then Allah will protect him from that fear on the Day of Judgment, that greater fear, that greater trial. And this greater trial is not something to be ignored. In fact, we have descriptions of the Day of Judgment in the Quran, and particularly Surah Al-Hijja, where Allah describes for us in the little that we can understand. In Surah Al-Hijja, ayah number 2, the Quran describes for us the fear that strikes the hearts of people on that day. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. Allah describes for us what that fear is like. He says, a day in which you will see that every nursing mother will forget the child, that baby that she is nursing. And every female who is carrying a child will let go of that. And you will see that people are in a state of sort of being unsure about themselves. It's almost as though they are intoxicated on that day. But they are not, of course, intoxicated. وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. This is the state, this is the punishment of Allah. The adhab of Allah, that punishment and that torment of Allah is indeed great. And Allah is basically, in these ayat, he's trying to describe for us is that difficulty that we will face on that day. And if we are able to fulfill those obligations that we have and forego those difficulties that we face in this world, then and maybe then we can be freed of that fear. We can forego that fear on that day. And in fact, one of the blessings that Allah has given us as Muslims, as mu'mineen, as those who are able to benefit from the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt, is to recognize that difference between material struggle and material difficulty and that higher difficulty, that moral and spiritual struggle. In various parts of the Quran, we see that others who don't have that guidance of Allah, whenever a difficulty strikes their lives, they are unsure of what to do. In Surah Al-Fajr, Allah describes this for us. He says, a people who mankind is a being where if a goodness enters into his life, then he thinks that Allah has honored him. But when a difficulty enters into his life, he thinks that Allah has disgraced him and has turned away from him. Most people are like this. If they see themselves in prosperity, then they will think that Allah has shined His blessings on him. And when they see themselves in difficulty, then maybe they think that Allah does not love them or does not appreciate them or maybe even has turned away from them. But it is the true mu'mineen and mu'minat who can understand that hierarchy of creation, who place the moral and the spiritual realm above the material one. And we all pray for those of us who do not have that tawfiq to allow us to undertake that path towards the house of Allah. O Allah, if not this year, then inshallah in the upcoming years, place us among those hujjaj, those pilgrims towards your house. O Allah, allow us to have that recognition of your grace and your blessings within our lives, and make us among those mu'mineen and mu'minat who recognize that blessing and for whom that blessing is ever increasing. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر صلى الله عليه وسلم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي علي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين.